email?
About the girl, yes,
Isn't that shocking?
shocking. Other. What am I being?
Yeah, you're echoing.
There's so many.
And
Text you. Yeah.
yeah, the only thing that we open us.
Yes.
So we.
Yes. And,
I know, I just, what we're doing. Short, but it's also like, none.
they have.
I mean, no comments.
Well. She was that. Today decision.
Let's say.
We put
Okay,
the updated roster.
Report decision.
Yes.
Is there coming
Oh,
past
that's what's
September
up.
20th?
Yes,
And we can go on. But there's-
Hey, can you hear us?
yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
And thank you so much. And you
No
can
problem.
see the room.
I can see the top of Ken's head right now. And somebody standing with a black water bottle, somebody walking by in light pants. Looks like the end.
There we
Okay,
go. It
that's,
just-
okay,
Okay.
there's
Thank you
Ken.
so much for checking.
This is Polly.
Yeah, looks good. Sounds good too.
Thank you.
Can I,
All right, we'll touch base afterwards. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
do I need to step out?
These doors, questionnaires. This is what you're supposed to send the governor's office. Contact me.
Okay, no, I'm in Salem.
She asked me for,
So I will be pulling out of here today, headed back your direction. So
It's also not.
let me look at my calendar. Let me go.
Six area. First one.
Really quick.
Yeah.
So I should leave here
Hi,
How are you?
how are you?
Not pregnant anymore.
You're looking very different. Do we have few pictures? Can I?
This
I
has
can be
been-
back by 3:30.
In 4 seconds, I can show pictures. How are you
I will
doing?
stop
I'm
as
okay.
soon as I get back.
You know, we're like digging into the,
Okay, all right.
Legislative session.
digging into the legislative session.
Send out,
I'm hoping,
you know, it's
like, let's knock on some, we gotta get the other round of automated dysfunction so I can start talking about something else. Please, please. What are you?
Uh, So hang on.
Here, I'm looking at baby
Oh, I'm
pictures.
sorry.
It's been since I've seen you. It's like,
Well, last time it was virtual, so
yeah.
that's been, yeah.
So many.
I agree.
Gosh.
Is he standing up already? He'll pull himself up, but he's like, he doesn't make it very long before he falls down. Yeah,
So fun.
yeah, and he's gonna be 9 months, so yeah, you're much in. But he's got so big.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna
He
swap.
was 3 months, he was in like the
Well, I think.
percentile, we could not keep weight on him. And now at 9 months, he's in the 90th percentile. So I think we overshot a little bit on making sure that he's gaining weight.
Okay, I was gonna-
Like, okay, you can slow down now, buddy, you know, like.
To see.
Yeah,
Should I send
anyway,
my?
but it's really fun. Mhm.
Yeah, they are. And they go from 9 months so quickly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, just
adult.
I didn't know.
I can't believe it.
That's what's, I'm like worried about being an older mom, because I feel like time generally goes faster now in my life. But I'm like, it's just gonna fly. You know?
Yeah.
It's like a shorter proportion of my life.
You have an awareness of So I appreciation.
Totally, yes,
The screenshot. of
Yeah,
whether they
exactly.
want to track and provide updates.
Yeah.
I feel like
Oh,
you should have.
Function.
Extensions. My law enforcement's really upset.
Because there's a ton of them.
That they. Okay, I can delete this.
Which, yeah.
So was on the agenda, she just, oh, it was not. It's happening.
Okay.
Yes, they're just like, it's a
So the
lot.
red dot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
so.
it's a lot. So it's, for us, it's like pricing out, you know, how much more time.
Yeah.
It's not.
Mhm.
So I think the, on the gym,
Us,
some of the gym.
but body cameras are.
Oh, right.
It's just to say like, I can send PDF. Time issues for.
Sure.
law enforcement. So just as a heads up.
I didn't even think about that.
I think
Yeah, so
whatever.
it's a body camera, and I don't know that
We talked about.
OSSA and the chiefs are aware that there's a version, I'm not gonna call
Yeah.
it their attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just know I get calls
Well,
every time I send a call.
So I actually remind.
And they're just miscovered. And we don't, I mean,
But we would have to, if we wanted to.
I
It was-
adjudicated like 10 felonies, so it's not a
You're
big
not-
deal for me.
Get it up there.
We had,
Right?
I mean, if you
there
send-
was this question.
Well, no,
like, the
it's voice.
DA's
Oh,
asking
around the
about,
website.
Yeah, I could do that.
like, healing
Sure,
versus
it's what that
redaction
was.
versus
What's
destroying.
wrong?
It's like-
Correct.
And so I'm like,
Was
we're completely open
Yeah,
to the
that's true.
statute, so you
Yeah,
basically
laptop
get,
work.
the court doesn't.
Kelly, it's
That's the
Chris.
preferred hand.
Bill checkers.
Just gives you your power.
Well, so they're redacting.
Yeah, but just
So.
Please.
Yeah, so this is one here. But I will.
So
pull up.
Yes.
Because
So
we're
there's
flag.
8 kids.
Yes.
So one turns 18 this month and then.
But the group as it relates to me is okay.
Yeah.
I didn't communicate on any of them. And so what I'm saying is,
Why don't you wait?
either that or you know they're all coming. Like,
Yeah, just do them all, just so you don't have to wait
Like-
till they're ready for it.
Molly, did you adjudicate on any of these? Nope. Get her done.
Oh, right,
Right.
because you know it's, you
Yeah,
get,
they're-
then your endorsement of compliance can, because they can, because guess what?
I know.
You can destroy stuff without being asked.
Well, as I said, here's the deal. In 6 months, all 6 of them will have hit their 18th birthday, right? Because now what I'm doing is literally every month for these group of kids, every month, one of them has a birthday.
I see, okay.
And so they're going back to this.
I mean, it doesn't.
And the next month I send the next one.
How I was.
You just missed. Oh, I didn't see this. Here's the deal. I know they're all gonna be, so we're
Okay.
having some communication, but that's what there's.
Just to kind of
It's
show.
not about big cases for us, and it's typically property crimes.
Yeah.
It's typically,
Redacting, and then,
and then here I come with the next one.
13.
so I
Yeah.
think that there would be like some
I didn't want to choose a
So
building.
think that through on how we.
Yeah.
manage that.
Okay,
So it's
okay.
Not so.
Yeah, this is.
At least it's like-
Some of this.
I mean,
Just think about it.
and so I know that some, I know it's so early. The last person I got, like Tracy, I remember talking to her about the board in Portland,
Uh-huh.
and they were well. Sometimes it's like, we want to get this into a notice. I mean, because the alternative is you file a motion to compel.
Right.
And so sometimes like.
So I think,
Okay.
if we can come up with some agreements.
I watched it. That was like.
What is it?
That's the one that's in healthcare, it's the petition.
So, okay, that's super interesting. Okay, we could put,
And again, they're not mad that it's happening.
Who are just practical.
Just because.
we just don't want to do like repeated.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
Administrative secretary nightmare.
Yeah, I've been talking.
It seems.
Are you surprised?
Okay. There's all these, it's so. And we have some fixes, of course, in the statute.
Yeah.
And it's like,
There's one out there.
Even the messaging out, like this is the floor, you can do more.
yes,
um,
yeah, work with your, yeah.
I think it's out to the left.
Yeah, so.
And every time I read this statute, somebody just from Deschutes is like, oh, this is what it says. I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't say that. And I was like, oh my gosh, it does say that. Because like sections got, like at the end of the day, legislative council, and they put in statute, got separated. Where it makes sense, but then so things that were together and we're like reading it like, yes, it's like, this is, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, statute's always fun. But.
Yeah.
Again, they're not on board, they're just.
Yes, okay, so we could come up with, well, maybe I'll shoot something.
As you guys think through it, on how to avoid it becoming a fiscal for them.
Yeah. Well, this is part of it. You know, we could have a different system where it's like. There's zero data anywhere that having a record improves public safety, but we're really tied to these records. We've created a whole like expensive process around maintaining records of each. And it's like, which I have opinions about why we decided to do that, but we could have done something completely different when you.
So I have some differing opinions now about JJPC. So it was wonderful, but. Is it really?
And do they not have a way of like sealing a report? Or like
Smell.
I don't know about that on the body cams.
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know what to do about that. I don't even want to think about that.
I think that should just be issued anyway. I mean, I just think sometimes it doesn't matter. If there is a youth who qualifies for it to function the whole,
Could you seal it until the youngest
or maybe that.
qualifies and then destroy it at that point or whatever?
That works.
Yeah.
But I think the statute, the work.
I think the statute already allows that.
Totally. But that might be like
That
a.
might be the workaround. They don't seal it until.
The youngest.
All right, it's fine.
Also the statute. Yes.
Wait, sir.
Be to the back row, Joe.
You're
I
good.
can't sit in the seat.
Okay. Presenters here and then, yeah, the real guest staff.
Really? Well, I know. Yeah, no, it's gonna be sponsored. All
The
of this.
practical implications, yeah.
Normal stuff. Or maybe abnormal.
To be abnormal in the panel.
How's it going?
There's so.
Well, yeah.
There's so much.
So much stuff.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kyla. Can't see you, but there, you be at the bottom.
I'm actually just a couple minutes away. I'm just starting us off by phone. But I think according to our agenda, we don't start until 10:35. Is that correct?
Our secret agenda, yes.
Secret schedule.
Okay.
All my things are now
Before we officially start, one thing I did want to ask is that we do roll call before I kind of jump in with the public testimony. Would someone be willing to lead that? Maybe Winifred, would you be able to do that?
Sure.
Okay. And we can wait the couple minutes because I think there's still people who are either jumping on or joining.
Didn't think so.
Number two, let's look at the tree.
You get less capable over.
I will. I'm not been around.
Off the drugs.
Well, you don't know. At the end of the meeting, tell me if you think of it.
It's your
I-
experience.
Oh, here.
Relatively old.
Maybe you're the second one to see that.
Totally.
Did you see or whatever?
Yeah.
Seed or something. Hey, Joe, how are you? Good. How are you?
Huh? This person never.
And so like now people are like, it's a big deal.
Well, okay, good.
Like, wow, that's like a big debate, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't-
Here's here's Ellie.
No.
So
yes,
21.
pain, right? Because you're recovery pain.
Yeah.
And some reason I was going to.
You know, this is because they're both.
Oh, they are? Okay, nice.
So we went there for.
Which was it?
My
Like,
meniscus.
oh, meniscus. Yeah, and so I think when you. And she.
I should have just texted me. Because they've never.
Physical therapy, like, no.
All right, well, we can go ahead and get started if you all are ready.
6 minutes.
That is weird. Uh-huh.
So the setup.
We're gonna go and get rolling. I think we do enough folks and. Turn it back over to you, Chair.
All right, everybody ready? All right, good morning. Thank you for coming to our JJPC meeting today, this lovely winter day. Your participation is important to us, and we definitely appreciate all of you for taking your time. We know you're incredibly busy, so again, thank you. And before we jump in, I would like for us to do roll call, so I'm going to turn it over to Winifred, and she will help get us going with roll call. Thank you, Winifred.
Chair. Commissioner O'Leary.
Here.
Commissioner Geelan.
Here.
Commissioner Detman.
Here.
Chair. Armstrong, Romero.
Here, technically.
Commissioner Rogers.
I'm here.
Commissioner Berger.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy. Commissioner Williams.
I'm here. Technically, it's K, my last name is K Williams,
Oh,
but. I'm here.
Commissioner K. Williams.
Yes, here.
Commissioner Brewer.
Here.
Vice Chair Rojo.
I believe that he will be joining soon.
Okay, I saw him on there.
Commissioner Davila. Here. Representative Anderson. Representative Lewis. And Judge Perez.
Here.
Great, thank you so much, Winifred. So as we begin, oh, sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Okay. As we begin, I'd like to invite members of the public to share their comments. We ask that you testimony speak. And just a new thing that we are implementing is that there will be another opportunity at the end of our meeting for public comment. So please note that discussions during the meeting are reserved for members of the commission. So we encourage you to share your thoughts during the designated public comment periods. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Proceed with public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Doesn't appear so, Chair.
All right, well, again, there's an opportunity at the end of our meeting for public comment. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ryan for an update on procurement for the technical assistant. So Ryan will be giving us an update about where we are in the process. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Still morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan Keck, Criminal Justice Commission. Giving you just a brief update on the procurement for technical assistance. So as you recall, I think at the last meeting, we were just opening or ready to open the RFP process for assistance for the commission related to kind of charge and the long list of areas in which analysis can be conducted by this entity. We ran that procurement. We, with input from 4 of you in this group, went through a selection process. There was only 1 application received, but the selection review was conducted nonetheless. Determination was made to select that 1 vendor. So we're excited to know that we are moving forward. So the selection was for the Criminal Justice Reform Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School. They'll also be partnering with the Council of State Governments, CSG, in their effort. So we're in the kind of final stages of contract negotiation for that procurement, working with Lewis and Clark to kind of get that going. As a reminder, the statement of work and the focus is generally to provide assistance to this body as you conduct your work with some particular asks made by you all, that being a review of or bringing forward connections or best practices from other entities, other states or other sources across the country, as well as the ask related to an inventory of Oregon-related work groups or otherwise that are underway or maybe come as a result of this legislative session so that this body can work on doing some of those projects. So that's where we're at, again, trying to look to execute that contract as quickly as we can with the goal of having the vendor or the contractor here and joining us for your May meeting. Is there questions?
No question?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is Ken. And Ken, welcome. Really appreciate you for taking your time to come talk to the JJPC to provide us with some guidance about our role as commissioners of the JJPC, proxies and legislative engagement. So Ken will share with us and discuss what it means to be a commissioner, share and discuss proxy policy and legislative engagement policy. So welcome, Ken. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a brief presentation to go along with what I'll talk about today. So it's nice to meet everybody. I know I've met some of you before, mostly virtually, but my name is Ken Sanchrin. I'm the director here at CJC. And it's my understanding that through some of the discussions you all have had in your other meetings, it would be beneficial to talk through, what it really means to be a commissioner in the executive branch, and especially how that squares with some of the statutory responsibilities that this commission has. And so I've got some basics drawn from the commissioner handbook that folks are given when they first are appointed. But then also we have some internal policies and then also some new governor's office policies on legislative engagement, just so we can talk through what that process looks like and how you can utilize us as CJC staff to assist you in your statutory responsibilities. So you're going to give me I have the power now. Right. And I would love for this to be also more of a discussion. So feel free to stop me at any point, whether we want to have some clarification or if there's some nuance. Obviously, everything that's in that handbook that comes from the governor's office, it doesn't contemplate every possible iteration of the types of work that our different commissions do. So, there we go. All right, so real brief, I'm sure that you all know this. This is your controlling statute. But just as a way to show where I'd like to focus today, when we look at the statute that created the JJPC, it really brought down a primary responsibility upon you as commissioners, and then taking your primary duty and kind of enacting it through 3 different areas. We're going to focus on one of them kind of to the exclusion of the others today. But really the primary responsibility of the JJPC is to perform analysis of the juvenile justice system. And there's a long list of different areas that you're asked to provide that analysis to, or different topic areas. But then what you're supposed to do is to take that analysis and apply it to these 3 areas that we have up here. And so the first one, and it is the one that I'll focus on for the majority of my discussion today, and that's making recommendations for either new legislation, new possible statewide policies, procedures, and to analyze legislation that's proposed by others. The second one is to develop those data-driven procedures, best practices that are more like policy areas. And then the third is to oversee funding for pilot projects should the agency, or should the commission, excuse me, receive any money, whether from the legislature or elsewhere, that it can give out across the state. Like I said, I'm going to focus mostly though on this legislation piece, because while it seems very clear in statutes, there's a responsibility to do this. How we actually get that done is a little bit more complex in practice. So also just real briefly thinking about how the JJPC fits into the board and commission structure that we have across the state. There are literally hundreds of boards and commissions that we have. Every once in a while, we actually get together in this building. We're in the big hearing room across the way, and it's all the small boards and commissions. There's probably about 200 or 300 folks who will show up for that, directors and deputy directors. And so there are lots of different boards and commissions. We on the JJPC are technically an advisory board. What separates an advisory board from other types of boards is that we don't have any rulemaking authority at present. That's something that, even if it's not given in the enabling statute for a commission, that can be provided later. So for example, if this commission was given the responsibility to administer a grant, most of the time that grant comes with rulemaking responsibilities as well to lay out the details of how that grant's going to be administered. But at the moment, due to our absence of any rulemaking authority, this is an advisory board. And so it really focuses on making policy recommendations to our appointing authority or authorities. Most of you all, your appointing authority is the governor. And so that's what we'll kind of be talking about today, how we flow through that governor's office process when we're trying to make any of these recommendations, especially legislative recommendations. However, we do have one person who's appointed by the judicial department, and then 2 folks, or I think it's 2 legislators, right? 2 legislators as well. And so their responsibilities are slightly different, but the bulk of us are operating, and as a commission, we are operating as an executive branch body. And so there are certain procedures that we have to follow. But there's a delay as this goes through. And so even though we're an executive branch agency, oversight of our commission comes from 2 places. The legislature is what is going to set our budget, is going to have other types of oversight responsibilities, mostly during legislative session or during reporting periods when we have to provide reports back to them. The governor, though, and myself and our staff at CJC as governor's office staff, we're the ones who are responsible for the day-to-day operation of the commission. The governor's office, though, is also involved in developing the budget for the wider CJC, but that would include the JJPC as well, which we can talk about a little bit if folks are interested. They appoint me as the agency director. They appoint you as board directors. And then kind of key to this discussion, They are the folks, the governor's office are the folks that approve all legislative asks, but then also connected to that, all budget asks too. And so, like I said, that's where we'll focus a lot over the next couple of slides, thinking about how that actually works, because there's a statutory mandate to do some of these jobs, but then we have to make sure we do it through the governor's office process as well. So just taking a tiny step back again to roles as commissioners. So we have been, I should say you have all been appointed to serve all Oregonians. That's your primary responsibility as a board member. It says in the board book that you're supposed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Very, very big responsibility. However, as we know in the statute, a lot of you are appointed as representatives of member organizations or of a type of organization. So representative of district attorneys, a representative of defense, the defense community, for example. And so while your primary responsibility is always to protect Oregonians as a whole, as a representative of your organization or special interest group, you are here to provide the commission with your technical expertise, your lived experience as a member of that group, and to bring the point of view of that group to this commission. And that is kind of a nuanced thing, because sometimes on commissions of this type, folks are asked to speak on behalf of their group, right? And that's a little bit different than just speaking as, or bringing your point of view as a member of that group. So for example, if you're somebody who, you may be a member of ODAA, the group of prosecutors, and you can speak, given your experience as a prosecutor, given your experience, maybe even in ODAA meetings, but to be asked to speak for your organization officially is not something that is normally asked of an individual in these types of meetings. You can, but that is something that usually that individual would have to go back to their association to get that permission to do. Or for example, to like if you all develop a policy or you want to develop a legislative idea or concepts, and you would like to have all the associations that are represented in this room and virtually sign off on that policy, that would be something you'd have to send that member back and see if they could secure that recommendation. And so I think it's just important to remember that normally somebody who is speaking as a representative of prosecutors, defense attorneys, any of these types of groups, juvenile directors, that they're drawing on their experience more so than they're trying to speak as a mouthpiece for their organization in that given moment. I would also say that just because you are a member of or a representative of an organization, it doesn't mean you have to limit your comments to that. I oftentimes myself like to, when I'm on boards, speak to the fact that I grew up as a kid in a very rural area. It was back east, but like a rural area, rural part of the state that was very much ignored by the capital of our state. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for making sure that we treat rural areas as fairly as possible. That's never going to be represented in why I'm appointed to that commissioner group, but it's something I like to bring. So you don't have to limit yourself in that way. Another note is that, and as we kind of see today, we have some absent folks. Members are also expected to attend meetings and be active participants. Technically, if you miss more than 2 meetings in a row without at least getting leave from the chair or notifying the chair of the reason why you're missing, then according to state law, you can be asked, or you can be asked to be, or you can be removed from that group. I will say I've not seen that happen except in much more extreme circumstances in the past, just in the time that I've been around. So another important note is that the authority is given to a board of commissioner or board of boy, it's early. Sorry, I'm a single parent right now. My wife just left on a trip, and so I've already had a heck of a morning with school delays and things like that. It's not what I was designed for. So authority to act is given to the board or commission as a whole, and not necessarily to its individual members without permission from that board or commission. So now we're kind of getting into whether you want to speak to outside groups as a JJPC commissioners, to the legislature as a JJPC commissioner, or almost in any other fashion. And so it's really important to make sure that viewpoints of the commission are represented as what is developed by the commission as a whole. But then also, especially if you're really going to speak for it, it's best to mention that to the commission and make sure that this is something that is known to your other members. And so I think that this is one of those things that it's always really important to take real proactive care in thinking about what hat you're wearing when you're speaking to different groups, just to make sure that it's clear when you're speaking maybe as a director of something versus as a JJPC member. And sometimes it can be a little bit, a little bit awkward, but just kind of that continual reminder as to who you are in that moment. So now let's talk a little bit more about legislative engagement. I guess I'll pause for a moment. Any questions just about this general idea of what it means to be a commissioner? Yes, Brian.
I imagine there are some like nuances for those of us who are state agency employees that we don't necessarily need to get into the details of, but I think, right, as a state agency director, Joe as well, maybe somebody else that I am Mary. There are things that we, if nothing else, related to like potential conflicts of interest. And
Yeah.
Everybody knowing that we're in these roles as state employees is probably important too.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I think there are definitely some nuance. I feel like it almost seems like double responsibilities or double work sometimes you have to do because, you already know what you have to do to go through for your agency to get, permission to testify on something legislatively. Maybe we have to do the same thing through the commission, through our staff. But yeah, there's definitely an extra layer there.
And I'll put an emphasis on, we're doing double work.
It was stated officially, right?
Yeah, for me.
Sympathy?
Something.
Any other questions or questions online? I'm not always facing the screen, so folks online, especially if anybody else is in the room or a hand raised, please let me know so I don't miss anybody. Okay, it doesn't seem so. Okay, so now we'll just talk more specifically about legislative engagement. So first, we're just going to talk about the role of boards and commissions and how that fits into the governor's and executive branch procedures. And then we'll go through kind of the two different ways that we might look at legislation. And first is whether we as a body would want to propose our own legislation, but then also we know that 2,000 or 3,000 bills were just dropped, a few weeks ago in the legislature. So how we want to engage on those bills that are in front of the legislature currently. So while this commission is authorized by statute to analyze and propose legislation, like I mentioned, we need to do that through the governor's office process because we were appointed by the governor. We're also overseen by an executive branch agency. And so what we have circulated as staff, and I'm not sure, Joe, going back to other administrations, but it was really nice that this governor's office during this session has now released a 2 or 3 page document that actually lays out much more directly than I have seen in my time at the state how this is supposed to work. So that's really nice to have that. We've circulated it for you to look over. I've tried to hit some of the highlights here so we can use this as a reference guide too. And so first, we'll just talk about what if this body wants to propose its own legislative idea. So the commission certainly can propose any legislative concept or legislative idea it wants to, but it needs to come through us at CJC. And it needs to come during the run up to a long session. So, for folks who are not too familiar with the legislature, we have our long and short sessions, long sessions during odd years, short sessions during even years. Long sessions go from about Martin Luther King Day to around July 4th. Short sessions are like this mad sprint of like 45 days. Is it 40 or 45 days? I forget. Something like that, starting again right around Martin Luther King Day. Agencies are allowed to propose bills during long session. During short session, unless there is an emergent need, generally agencies are not allowed to propose bills. And so that's why we want to focus on the run to long sessions. Now, of course, to do that, because we are in government, we like to take our time. Usually you have to begin a year ahead of time. And so the commission, for example, now has 3 agency bills for before the legislature. We started working on those bills actually even before January of 2024, but we began the proposal process in January of 2024. And so for this commission, we've kind of missed the boat on anything we want to propose this time. But if we want to propose something next time, then we should begin maybe discussing through the remainder of this year so we can have an eye toward January of 2026 to begin that formal process if there's something that we'd like to do. Now, that doesn't mean that your bill has to be completely hashed out by January of 2026. That's just when the process begins. There's also ways to create essentially placeholders to where the policy will come a little bit later. And so working with our staff, we can figure out if that's a direction you all want to go in. Now, if your concept is merely policy-based, then it will be just considered on the merits of what's in the bill. However, if there's a potential fiscal impact to a bill, we as agency staff will also have to include that in our budget build, which starts around the same time, about a year before long session, to have that go before the governor's office and state CFO as well. And so it gets a little bit hairier there. In that case, a bill that has a fiscal impact, it could be either, if it's a great idea, perhaps it's adopted, but if it's not adopted, maybe it's based on just the policy, or maybe it's based on how well it fits into the wider state budget that the governor is going to propose. And so we would have to think about that ahead of time as well. But in the end, the governor and CFO have final say as to which budget asks and then which legislative concepts will go forward. And we don't really have any recourse if they don't want to. And then, especially as agency staff, but then also as representatives of the governor, if we have a concept that we wanted to put forward and it is not adopted, then we really are not supposed to speak to it. If we have a budget ask that was not approved, then we're not supposed to go out and advocate for it or speak to it, at least again, wearing those official hats. So I'm more limited than you all might be, but that's where it would be important to make sure that you're identifying who you are acting as in a moment when you're talking about legislative ideas or budget asks, because you all can always just say you're a member of the public and say whatever you want. That's a little harder for some of us who are agency staff. Any questions on that first piece there?
So I do have an interesting question. We have legislators on our,
Yes.
and they, I have seen in past where legislators, they are not bound quite the same as we are. Okay.
Yeah, legislators are certainly not bound the same way we are. I think that it would be bad form if a legislator said, I am the JJPC member who is proposing this.
It's
Again,
what I've seen, like,
but-
even the creation of JJPC was from a legislative
Sure,
perspective.
yes.
And
yeah.
so I think this should go through the JJPC. I could see they have the freedom to do that where we wouldn't have that freedom.
Right, yes, yeah. I think it would be fine for a legislator to say, given my experience on the JJPC, I think this is an issue we should put forward, something like
Or
that. But
that
again,
that this be considered by them or looked at by
yes,
them.
by them, yes,
Yeah,
but again, it
we
would
don't
have to
have
be their
There,
bill.
there,
It
yeah.
would be, yes, exactly. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
Question about the process within your agency. I know within ODHS, it's a much larger and so many more filters that we go through before things get to the governor's office. So thinking about how asks get prioritized that go to the governor's office, is it safe to assume that if we were proposing a legislative concept, would it be competing with others in your office, or is it something that it would go to the governor's office and they would be looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being that we're a small agency, we don't usually have that many LCs. I think the most I've seen us initiate have been maybe 4 or 5. And so I think that they don't get lost in the shuffle too much. And frankly, we've not had enough legislative concepts where we've been asked to prioritize in the past. Of course, they might usually the governor's office will kind of assign a red, yellow, green to them. And so maybe they're all yellow, or something like that. But yeah, we're not usually limited in that way. But based on that question, hopefully not getting too far in the weeds, one thing I would mention is that while our legislative concepts, usually we don't have too many of those, we do oftentimes, much like the bigger agencies, have a lot of CFO budget asks. So that is where prioritization might become a little bit more relevant. The CJC, kind of taking a step back from just the JJPC, but the CJC itself, we administer a lot of grants, and a lot of those grants we only have on a biennial basis from a funding perspective. And so, for example, this past biennium, even though we were asked to keep all of our asks to 1% of our budget, which is about $1 million for CJC, I think that our asks were about $100 million because we just have grants that if the grants go away, then the counties don't get money to do the work that we've been told to ask them to do. And so that's where I might worry a little bit more on how prioritization fits in. But I would also say that, we're here to walk hand in hand with this commission. And so we'll be upfront with you as to how that may fit in. Just like I said, sometimes we may have to prioritize grant funds over some other idea. But we can still see how to fit that in the best way that we can. And then that'll be part of my responsibility with the governor's office reps to kind of communicate here's core CJC, here's the JJPC. I think in the original vision of what this commission should be. You know, we're here to incubate the commission to maybe then be its own thing one day. And so I would argue to the governor's office that it may be a little bit unfair just to lump everything together. That it should almost be thought of as a slightly separate thing. We'll see if they take that idea. Any other thoughts or questions on this so far? All right. As far as advocating then for bills, any bill or budget priority that is included in the governor's budget or is approved by the governor's office, we have free reign to advocate for, to support, you know, to go to the legislature and to push, whether it's kind of in the hallways and in the offices or officially in hearings. However, again, if we don't get that approved, we're not allowed to advocate for that. So specific to you all as commissioners, again, like we mentioned earlier, you must be empowered by the commission to speak on behalf of it. That's not something that I would view necessarily to where, like, you know, Joe would not have to come to the commission and have you all vote up or down. I think it's more if there's a consensus. I mean, a lot of times it could even just be as you're talking in the meeting and you choose your victim who has to go actually do the testimony, then, you know, they might get assigned to do it, or maybe you do have somebody who really wants to, and then usually that's when, you know, they volunteer and everybody else feels good that they don't have to go sit in front of the dais. Again, you have much wider ability to advocate on your own, but please make sure you identify kind of who you're speaking as if you do go and engage with the legislature. It would be a good idea, though, to let us know whether it's me as the agency director or just through staff, if you're thinking of going and wearing the JJPC hat, just to let us know that you're going to be there. And then we could also offer any assistance or thoughts. I know some folks in this on this commission probably have not engaged with the legislature before. So there's even just, you know, that nervous feeling of how you address legislators, how you answer questions and things like that. We'd be more than happy to help on that side.
So quick question on this, since we don't have any agency bills,
Right.
right, we're in the middle of session, but some of our partner agencies, the state agencies, have bills in the governors that have been approved by the governor. So can you, not necessarily even us, but how does that play out? If an agency has an approved bill through the governor, can partner agencies support those bills or not? And I guess I'm asking more for you guys, not for me.
Right. So if OIA has a bill,
That's what,
if CJC
or
come in and
YDO.
say, this is a great idea.
You guys can.
Yeah, it would be bad form if I came in and said it was terrible.
You can't do the opposite. You definitely can't do the opposite.
No, yeah. No, I don't mean to make light. Yes, I could come in.
Ag may have an idea
Right.
that's competitive with this. So I just didn't know how you guys get to support each other across. So,
Yeah, and I'd say maybe the Department of Ag example, there is a bit of siloing to agencies. And so even if there is some sort of maybe budgetary competition, we're not appearing in front of the same people or the same decision makers. And so I think an example is more similar, you know, if
Yeah.
OIA has an idea, but we are supposed to just maybe from that competition standpoint, as a wider enterprise, we all support the governor's budget. So yes, it would not be kosher for me to go in and say the Department of Ag shouldn't get as much money because I need more or anything, or to trash one of Joe's wonderful bills or anything.
it is okay potentially to go in and say this is on a pop from a CJC perspective or for an OIA bill. So that's.
Sure,
okay.
sure. Yeah.
I
I
never
mean,
asked that question before. I just never knew if you guys could support each other.
sure. Yeah, and we do on occasion, I guess. Usually it's a little bit more of a process, like if I wanted to support the judicial department's bill, since they're a different branch, usually I would ask for permission there, but yeah, I think if I.
If it's governor's, we're good to go.
Budget hearing, I don't know how far I would get him, but I could.
Okay. Cool. I just never thought of it.
Yeah. So let's see. So yeah. Any other questions on this last slide? All right, so this is maybe the place where we would be thinking a lot more directly this session and certainly future sessions too. But what do we do when we have legislation that is offered by others? So proposed by outside groups, other legislators. We do need to get prior authorization from the governor's office to take a public stance on any bill that's proposed by others. And that would be a bill, its amendment, anything related to a bill. And that's whether we want to do verbal testimony, have individual meetings with legislators, written testimony, any of those types of things. I guess, yeah, so to get that authorization, I printed this off this morning. What we have to do and what I would encourage you to do is if this commission wants to take a stance on any of the bills that are proposed, it needs to come through us as staff because we have this long form that we have to fill out. And so I'll just pass. I've got a couple copies. I don't have copies for everything, but if you just want to pass it around. And so it's not something that comes with no work. You know, I can't just call up my advisor, you know, in the governor's office and say, hey, HB 2234 or something like that. Is that good? And then I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So we fill out this form. Most of the time, what the governor's office is looking for when we're taking, and yes, Commissioner Berger, I'll get to in just 1 second. Most of the time when we're looking at this, or what you see on this form is kind of the first question is, how does this fit into the governor's stated priorities of housing, homelessness, behavioral health, and education? I'm not sure for my other directors in the room, the experience you've had with this so far, but sometimes it's been a little bit tough to get approvals to do much beyond that. And so that's just a heads up since we're kind of in this public safety space. But this is where we would focus on, and we could try to make some good arguments on how it fits into the priorities and everything else. But we'd have to fill this out, turn it into the governor's office. They do try to turn it around in about 48 hours or so, given the speed that legislation moves, and then we can get a call as to what we might be able to do. Commissioner Berger, sorry I missed you there for a moment.
No, there was no problem whatsoever. I was just wondering if that form could be scanned and given to commission members electronically.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't realize we'd have people online today. I would say that we'll send it around, but again, this is something you guys should have staff help you fill out. And so I wouldn't initiate it on your own, even though it has kind of the submission details on the bottom. Yeah, we can pass that around or send it out electronically. So this is what we would want to fill out if you all need or want to take an official stance. If you're being kind of proactive on a bill, right? There is a little bit of nuance, though, as to how you can provide feedback to legislation so that prior authorization from the governor's office is not necessarily required to offer technical feedback on a bill when you are requested to do so by a legislator. And we as either agency staff or others kind of as representatives of the executive branch, we should be helpful to legislators when they ask us questions. We should be responsive. And so that is a little bit of a nuance to where, you know, and what I've tried to do to even facilitate that for this group is to talk to Rep. Krupp, for example, and say, hey, if you have any bills that you would like the JJPC specifically to look at, please send them our way. And there's a couple that he's thinking about that he might want to send over. And then that would unlock this ability to be a little bit more flexible in just talking with him one-on-one or going before House Judiciary or something in that case. But again, the key is there, it's for technical feedback. You can talk about how would this impact the system? How would this impact my local system? How would this impact, you know, my job as a prosecutor or a defense attorney or any of those other types of roles? That's something that you can talk about a little bit more freely. You should go in, however, and make sure that you are very clear on the record if you're doing something that's in public, that you're neutral on the bill. Again, you're just neutral. You're offering technical feedback in response to questions, as opposed to saying, even if kind of the tenor of your feedback, you know, is somewhat negative or somewhat positive, you need to emphasize your neutrality because it's not really, it's not okay to go in and without filling out this form to say that you officially oppose as a JJPC member or officially support a bill. And then I guess too, we shouldn't forget that piece so that if we are going to offer technical feedback, if Krupp said, please offer feedback on this bill, it'd be best for the commission to select who and empower, you know, to empower the folks who are going to be the ones who go and do that work. That way the commission itself knows who they've selected as the mouthpiece, either for those one-on-ones or those meetings, the more official meetings. Questions on that? Okay. All right. And this just goes into what I was mentioning a moment ago. You must remain neutral, even if the tone is somewhat less than neutral. But then too, if there are any bills that we have major concerns over, or you all have major concerns over, that's something that we should elevate to the governor's office so that even if we don't testify on that bill, agencies are asked to fill out different forms prior to bill signing. So if a bill makes it all the way through the legislature, but there are still some major concerns the executive branch has, we can elevate those to the governor's office so the governor can take that into consideration when she's deciding whether she should sign or not, or even on budget bills. You know, there's line items to be vetoed. And so that's an important part of the process as well. And so that's another way that we can have some input on legislative ideas. Okay. So that was it for the legislative pieces. Any other questions on that? Or again, it's nice to have other agency directors in the room. I'm not sure if you all have any advice as well beyond kind of the basics that we just put out here. Like I said, it's nice to actually have guiding documents now too. So all of this is reflected in the governor's office handouts that we've sent out for the meeting. Okay, so another thing that I was asked just to speak on a little bit by the chair is thinking about how we make decisions as a commission. And really, what's nice about how we make decisions as a commission is it's largely up to you, the standard that you all use, and then also somewhat kind of up to the chair if it's left a little bit less well-defined. So what I would say, for example, on our big commission, the CJC commission, we don't have necessarily a bylaw governing how we tend to vote or how we make decisions. It's not stated in our statute. It's much more of a traditional thing. It's run through our chair, at least in the time that I've been with the commission. And I would say that we really operate under a modified consensus model. Rarely do we all agree, but most of the time, and this is something we try to set up for the commissioners as staff as well. There are some things we know that are going to be controversial, and so we'll set them as action items on our agenda, and we know there's going to be an official motion and an official vote. It's kind of a modified Robert's Rules approach. We're not crazy when it comes to the Robert's Rules, but we should at least try to propose a motion, second the motion, have discussion, and then vote on it. However, when we don't think that things are very controversial, or maybe kind of the presumption going into most discussions is we're going to use some sort of consensus-based discussion model where we try to at least determine through that discussion whether we have general agreement among the commissioners. If we either don't, or if it seems close, that's where it's the prerogative of our chair to then say, hey, I think we should put a motion on the table and we could get a vote on this to figure out where we stand. That's the model that our CJC commission uses. However, again, you all can select whichever approach you'd like. If you'd like something that's more formal, where everything is based on motions, and that is certainly within your rights. If you want something that's much less formal, kind of like what we do at CJC, that's also fine. But I wanted to at least just put up a couple of different ideas for how consensus can be garnered through different types of organizations. Clearly, the most stringent form is full consensus, where an organization or a body doesn't move forward unless 100% of the folks agree. Very, very difficult to use, but it's one that certainly when you have different membership organizations that are members of a commission, sometimes that's where they want things to be, because I've gone through these processes before where, an organization may not want to be tied to the decisions of that body if they don't agree with it. And so maybe that's something you'd like to pursue. However, most use some sort of modified consensus, and we put up a couple different consensus models here. Consensus -1, where you have to have at least 2 folks who are against a decision. That would make it to where it would not go forward. Maybe more of a super majority, so you could pick, even saying super majority, it could be 90%, 3/4, 2/3, as far as moving forward, or just a simple majority consensus can be used as well. But this is what I would leave open to you, and I think that the chair has some time set up for discussion about this after we're finished. So we can pull those back up if anybody's curious as you have your discussion, but I think I have one more slide before finish. Yes. The last was, my understanding is there was a question about proxy voting or just the use of proxies that came up during one of your meetings in the past. This is actually something that's been coming up a lot lately. We've not dealt with it before, but we have now, as an agency, done our due diligence, checked in with the Department of Justice, and written an internal policy with regards to proxies. So according to our policy, the use of a proxy or a designee is not permitted, except in the most narrowest of circumstances. And that's primarily because, according to state law and opinions by the Attorney General, you're not allowed to just appoint on your own somebody else to represent you when the governor chose you. to actually be the person who is to represent her, right? I can't just say, well, Ryan's my guy now. Every once in a while, in some statutes, it does state explicitly that a position it's either a person or their designee. But that I've only seen, at least at CJC, that is only for like 3 positions in one statute, but it is not this one. So I would say for the JJPC, when you're absent, you're absent, especially if there's going to be a vote. Maybe a little bit more nuanced is discussions by proxy members. Generally, discussions about substantive issues are also not permitted, kind of based on the same logic as voting. And so if you wanted to send another representative of you, then they could participate maybe in clarifying questions, scheduling questions. But as far as, if Joe was sick and he wanted Winifred to come and represent OIA, we would ask Winifred to take in everything that she's hearing and to report back to Joe. But she's not generally empowered to speak for Joe if he is the one who's formally appointed to that position. And this again
That only applies here.
Yeah, that is our internal policy. That's right. We chose to go a very conservative route. And so, but then a proxy can, certainly as just any regular person can, a proxy could offer thoughts during public comment, because if nothing else, they're a member of the public.
So I have a question on, again, the legislative members, we're all appointed by the governor. We have that piece here. I know legislators are often really busy. And so oftentimes they have somebody does that stay the same with them, or is that a little bit different when they're having their during session? I mean,
Right.
I can't imagine us having them. So is that the same?
Yeah, I mean, this is the policy that we have now.
Okay,
So we
I mean,
ask
that's
the
fine. I'm just
legislators
curious.
to adhere to that as well. But I think we are very sympathetic to legislative session issues. But I think that that's where, I would be okay if the member wanted to offer some thoughts, whether they can offer some written thoughts, or maybe they even come for a portion of the meeting and then they leave. We've had members take kind of different approaches to that as well, because it is almost impossible for them to attend.
Unless we're meeting on Fridays, right?
Yeah,
With their
right.
meeting day.
Right. But what we have found is when we are a little bit more loosey-goosey, it oftentimes gets very confusing.
Sure,
Um,
yeah, I appreciate it.
And sometimes unclear as to who is speaking for what, and what power do they really have to speak on behalf of that other member. And it gets really complicated really quickly. And then 2, to have somebody who's really speaking up pretty, vehemently perhaps, but then can't vote. That's something we've run into as well that can get messy really, really quickly.
Yeah, no, I get it for all of us, totally. That was the only, yeah. No, sounds good.
I think that is my last slide, so I will turn it back to the chair for whatever discussions that you all would like to have on whether it's decision-making or whatever else. Joe.
It's like a question about the application of public meetings law. A bunch of us run in the same circles discussing matters in our roles outside of the commission. And I wouldn't want to do anything that inadvertently jams us up when, and just a refresher, as long as it's not a majority of the commission, is that the rule? It is.
That becomes a public meeting.
Right.
I think there's a number attached.
Yeah, is there a number attached to it now? Yeah, we'll see if we can grab that in real time.
I just, that, I could see, I mean, several of us are in meetings together discussing the work we do here and there. And some of those meetings are not open to the public.
Yeah.
Or noticed, or, all of the things that need to be in a public meeting.
Right. Yeah, and we can look that up. I think the one thing that's always discouraged, and I'm sure, Joe, you've discouraged us as well, is it's one thing, I think, when you are kind of running into each other in your regular circles. But it's another thing. I think usually we try to avoid the most is like email correspondence where you have all the commissioners on, or a handful, or those types of things. Those can become pretty messy. But we'll see if we can get that exact number, because I know I've heard different standards over time, and we want to make sure we don't provide the wrong one. Any other questions? And I guess I'll kick it back to the chair.
So we are running a little bit behind. I'm going to make it really quick with the next section. And what we talked about in July about our governance procedures was that decisions are made by a majority vote. A quorum is required to conduct a vote. Quorum is 9 members present regardless of voting status. Voting is initiated by a motion from a member that is seconded by another member. A motion requires a simple majority, 51% or more votes to pass. That's what we talked about in July. Is there any heartburn about that being the governance structure, or would you like to explore another model? I think that there was some confusion last time with voting and what we needed to vote on and the motion, so I think it's a timely conversation.
Well, you're looking at me, so I'll weigh in. You know me, Kyla.
Sorry, Molly, you're just like in my.
I think that's probably the cleanest. I do think, though, that as we're moving to things that we should have a higher agreement. 50% plus 1 feels very low on some very difficult topics that we might be having conversations around. And so by no means am I offended by that, but I do feel like it might be worth thinking through a little bit higher level of consensus for some of the topics. And that's just my thought. I could be swayed multiple ways because 50 plus 1 is the easiest standard to get to. And 90% of the time, my guess is we'll probably be very close to consensus. But it's on those very difficult conversations that Ken mentioned that maybe we want to shoot for a little bit higher. I don't know.
I did have a question. It sounds like such a lawyer question, which is what makes it a difficult conversation? And what's the definition of difficult? Is it a difficult conversation because we disagree and have different perspectives? Or is it a difficult conversation because it's about legislation? Is it a difficult conversation because it has a budget? And I know that that's, it sounds like
I was
such a
thinking
lawyer.
budget. I know that is a lawyer question. I
Right.
was thinking money, but you know, it could be
Yeah.
other things too. We don't
And I-
have any money, so I guess maybe we won't have any difficult conversations.
And I don't disagree with you because I think that there are a lot of different opinions that people have. And I think that that's why there was different categories of who would become members, is so we could have a really diverse discussion.
And I know that there's some members, like the representatives and senators, they're not voting members, right? And Judge Perez is actually a voting member, but can abstain. But if needed for quorum, he can request that.
So the non-voting members don't count for quorum.
No, right?
They count for quorum.
They do.
In this case, they do. Sometimes statutes will say
They don't.
voting member, half of voting members, or this one happened, the way it was written was half the members. And so our non-voters do count
Helpful.
That's for quorum.
for quorum. Yes, yes. The little higher bar than sometimes as far as getting folks present.
That's what makes it interesting. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things in hindsight where it's, it would be nice to, if we'd caught that.
So if 9 was a quorum and we had 2 non-voting members, 7 would be voting, and we would need 4 of the 7 under our current to move forward.
If I could, just really quickly thinking of just a thought on getting 100% agreement. One model that I've seen work, so I was on a legislative task force where I think folks knew that the whole thing was to make recommendations, official recommendations from the body. But we had folks who were detractors. And so what was done when that report was written was that anybody who had voted no could attach either a vote explanation or some other type of explanation to that document. And so I think even if you were coming up with a legislative concept, maybe if there's like a position taken or something like that, then maybe you could have something similar from the commission, so that if nothing else, if you are somebody who's disagreeing with that idea, that it's really noted, and you don't have to worry about your organization or your viewpoint being suggested that you are in agreement with the way the commission is going.
that feel?
Well, I'm good anyway. It doesn't
I
matter.
like, I like that idea a lot. Yeah.
Oh, Pablo, we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just saying that I like that idea a lot. Attaching something, if we are gonna have, because we are a recommendation body. So just saying, I like that one.
Is what you're suggesting, that we would go then full consensus as the model and have the option of a minority report or majority vote with the option of a minority report?
I think majority was the
Yeah.
option. Is that,
We've seen. Both of those we've had before.
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out which one. I think we're trying to get consensus on this topic.
Motion vote.
I just wanted to make sure I knew which one we were talking. And I don't have a strong opinion really about which. But I do know I agree with Molly, there'll be some issues that I think, anytime we have prosecution and defense, anytime we have state and local, anytime, I could keep going. There are gonna be things that we agree to disagree on. And I think that's okay. Better than okay. Conflict can be really good and fleshing that out. And I guess I'm gonna stop talking now, and I'll say this. If we do majority, and we land on things where we are unanimous, that feels like it's a bigger deal, right? And so that might be the argument to do it as majority and then hope that we get consensus on as much as possible. But if there's like a really big friggin' issue and we're all like in agreement, then that's, I think, potentially gonna carry more weight.
I think next year too, we can revisit how it's going because it's just new and we don't even know quite what those difficult topics will be. So Lori, I'm so sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just wondering the harm in doing something like a 2/3 majority, because it just kind of feels like if it's 51%, it's like a wash. I guess I don't see if we just always had like 2/3 majority and I might not know enough what I'm talking about, but I'm just wondering, because that makes me kind of uneasy, this idea that half the people disagree really, and then we're just doing it. I don't know. Like, what would be the harm in doing 2/3? Just to show that it was actually something that this board that kind of represented us. I feel like 51% wouldn't.
I don't know if there's harm in doing 2/3, but I'm gonna defer to other experts. I don't.
Up to you all. Yeah, I think.
I think there's this sort of necessity to keep the work and the recommendations going forward. So the majority idea, like as a person who supports our youth development council, the majority consensus just like keeps things moving, sort of to answer your question. Like, I think the value of this other, more to Molly's point, the difficult decisions is perhaps, and those who may, when there's dissent, understanding the nature of the dissent and that it somehow be in the record. And maybe we may be at 50+1 as a commission, we want to move forward. 4 out of, five people say yes, 4 say no, but then how do you give voice to that 4 without it like slowing down the process of, okay, we got to move on. And so I guess I would submit that there are decision-making models, which I don't think we need to necessarily get into the weeds here now, but around like fist to 5, like, which is, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that. But it says, if nothing else, it says, oh, I support this idea, but I have concerns. I would support this, I support this, strongly. I'm a little less, but there's a level of my dissent that's, I don't like this idea and I'm never gonna support it publicly. That's like at the bottom. But maybe there's value in figuring out either through a minority report or a model that says, hey, your voice is heard. And yet the majority thinks we should move this forward. So I think you can create ways to have the voice demonstrated for public consumption. And, again, we can explore that if we want to.
It does make me wonder, and I'm thinking more towards legislation, that there can be, and I think Brian was really hitting on this really well, that there can be different levels of agreement or disagreement, but also different stages. Maybe everybody agrees in the basic concept, this needs to be fixed. And I'm thinking of some of the meetings I've had where you have prosecution and defense folks, they are just arguing over everything. They may actually agree, I've seen them agree, like, we need to fix this. And so maybe you could get folks to, you don't need a 2/3 vote on, or maybe you could use 2/3 vote there. But then I know, and thinking of what Commissioner K. Williams mentioned about being a lawyer is, once you get into the weeds of the exact language, I would almost worry a little bit about needing like 2/3 of the commissioners to get on board with the exact periods and commas and everything else, because sometimes we also
Don't worry
don't.
about quorum.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because sometimes too, we don't actually, like, I've seen very smart people completely disagree on literally 2 words in a bill. And I do think, as Brian's gonna get, it would, that's what would really slow things down. And so maybe we even have different levels or requirements for different items. But also that may be, as the chair has mentioned, something that you get into in an iterative fashion as you go forward, as opposed to just have to think through all the scenarios today.
You're right. I think trying it out with what we decided in July, let's try it. And then maybe it falls apart, but I mean, let's try it. You got it there and let's.
We are 15 minutes behind, and I want to make sure that we get to our next topic, which is a brief OLIS tutorial, and also just talking about our homework assignment, which I think is really important, and I want to make sure that we have enough. So if everyone's okay, we're gonna move forward with what we decided in July, with the caveat that there is an option for the minority. So it's the majority consensus model.
And I think we can do the oldest thing very quickly. We picked a bill that we know actually has some things going on with it, and so we're just gonna jump to that bill, and then we at least show you the basic functionality that Kelly can add on to it if she'd like as well. So what was the number?
813.
813. Oh, sure. Okay.
How was the birthday?
So it can be a little bit of a clunky system, but if you've not used it before, OLAS is a great transparency system, and it's not that bad once you get into it. So whether you just search for OLAS, like Google that, or if you get to the Oregon Legislature page, you can see OLAS right here is the Oregon Legislative Information System. And this is what it looks like when you first come in. Actually, usually that is collapsed. However, your browser will remember kind of like what you had open last time. And so you can just see like, what are the meetings going on today? Judiciary is always in the afternoon right now. And so you can go and either check on the committee itself, or you can go to the agenda for the day. If you go at that meetings today portion. You can also, when you go down, these are where you can see what votes may be happening on the floor for second, third readings. As far as a measure kind of progressing, but this is like the landing spot where you find general information about just, hey, what's happening today, or it can be what's happening any day if you pick a different date. What I think is more useful though, is when you go in and look at an individual bill. If you just Google OLAS and you get to OLAS, then it's going to default to the current session that we're in. You can easily navigate to other sessions, but we'll just leave that for today because this is supposed to be brief. So usually what you would do, it's going to default to today's session. You just go to bills, and then what was one?
813.
813. But this is a bill that you all identified that we can just go and look at the basics here. So when you click on 813, this is the landing spot. It provides the, sponsors, if any, the bill title, a very, very basic summary. But really the interesting pieces are everything else that's on the page here. What you can do first is you could scroll down. It's going to tell you the history of that measure. And so it's going to talk about when it was first introduced. This has been referred to the Healthcare Committee. A public hearing was held on the 30th of January, and this will continue to be fleshed out. If there's a work session and it's passed out of committee and it goes to the House floor or the Senate floor, goes to Ways and Means, whatever happens to it is going to be on this measure history. You also have scheduled events, if there are any. So what is the next step? So the first one is what's happened. Now what's the next step? You could also go up and look at different versions of the bill. Right now, this is a bill that was just introduced and has not been amended, but this is where you can see amendments, if amendments have been posted for a bill or adopted. Under this analysis tab, this is where you'll find kind of the internal analyses done by committee staff, or especially if a bill has a fiscal impact, you're going to see a fiscal and revenue impact documents created by the Legislative Fiscal Office for that bill if you're interested. But this is all more kind of the technicality. So sometimes it also will give a good summary. Like if you have a bill like 4002 during last short session that is like 80 pages long and does a whole bunch of stuff, some of these summaries that are in here by the committee staff are kind of nice to help you get through one of those giant bills without reading tons of lines of changes. This is one that actually has some stuff in it. Testimony. So we mentioned that you can testify in person or you can submit written testimony. If you submit written testimony for something, it's going to show up here and it's pretty much instantaneous when you submit it. And so you can see who has testified either for or against and what they actually specifically said. So this is somebody who is in opposition to this bill from Salem. You can either upload a letter or you can also there's like a text box that you can type in. So a lot of members of the public will type in a text box. Hopefully I didn't pull up anything. People can say whatever they want. So but sometimes it actually, maybe we're nerds. And so sometimes they can be fun.
Days of our lives.
I
Watch it every day.
Every once in a while, a CJC bill, I remember we read one a couple of years ago that said the CJC was trying to expand its empire. I don't know what that means, but that we're opposed to it.
Yes.
So you can look at the testimony. And then also, perhaps most importantly, is where you can register to testify or submit your written testimony here. And so this is kind of the basic landing spot for a bill. I know you all are behind, so we don't want to belabor it too much. I don't know, Kelly, if there's anything you'd like to add, but frankly, I think that this is probably the spot where you guys would want to be the most if you're not used to tracking bills. Any questions? Kelly?
Not to that. I think OLIS is much better than what we have on Bill Tracker. And then also you can watch the recordings, you can.
That's a great one. So yes, so thank you. Watching the recording. So if you don't happen to make a meeting, so like I said, this one had a public hearing on the 30th. You can go to that public meeting. Right?
Debbie did a really good job on it.
You did. No, don't show this one.
I watched it.
I'm leaving.
I think we have consensus that we want to watch. Testimony.
All you have to do is click on the little recorded button and it will take you to the video of that testimony.
I will add, if you're not already gonna add it, that what I found helpful is if you go to the agenda here,
Oh,
you
that's
can
it,
just
time
skip,
Yeah.
skip. Not to say they're not
We could go
important,
right
the
to
ones
Debbie.
go before. Yes, we could go right to them. But yes, that's really helpful.
Yes, and so you can watch the old recordings there.
Thank you. That's a good, I
Fantastic.
can't tell you how many things I've like password.
Yeah, it's.
Wait till you recognize somebody.
Yes.
And I'm kind of being blocked by my sharing thing here. However, also too, if you want to watch something that's happening right now, when you get to that landing page and are on the meetings for today, usually if something is actually in session, it'll just have that little button right there as it is. And so you can jump in real time and just watch what's happening at that moment, or later go back and watch the recording.
Also really fast with putting the recordings out.
They are this year, this session. It is really fast.
Questions?
Were you telling me?
Yes, I mean.
You need what you were.
I'm gonna go over the homework you all did, which is at the back of this packet, so I'm not gonna belabor it a bunch because I don't feel to have a great discussion about it, and I know, Karen, you're gonna see it all.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I think one of the things that I was thinking about going through the homework was just what we talked about during our last meeting about what our priorities are, where we wanted to focus, understanding that there are several focus areas, but the primary ones were diversion and restorative justice, service delivery disparities, and alignment with best practice, and how the bills that we're looking at, how they fit into what those focus areas are, and also how the discussion that we have today can shape what our goals are in the next, what, we have 2 more meetings this year, 3 or 3 more meetings this year.
Free.
Yeah. So just thinking about that in context of what we want to accomplish together with this homework, I think just wanted to bring that to light. And Kelly, won't belabor it, so feel free to just jump on it.
Yeah, so I'll be really quick since I'm not presenting anything new. So I'm Kelly Gwynn, I'm the research analyst at the CJC that's supporting the JJPC. So I was the one that you all sent your homework to by January 29th. So I want to mark that date because that's really early in the session. And I believe we will be revisiting this later when it's in May or so. So I just compiled, which is all in here, the most commonly tracked bills by the commissioners that has sent me information. So 8 commission members participated, so they sent me bills they were tracking that were relevant to the JJPC. There were 95 bills tracked. And within those 95 bills, there were 75 unique topics. So some of them had both a Senate bill and a House bill, or they were placeholder bills duplicated quite a few times. So you'll see here the most common ones that at least 3 of the 8 commission members had indicated they were tracking and interested in as it was relevant to the JJPC. And so so here is just like kind of a snapshot of the ones that at least half of the commission members had mentioned that they were tracking and they believe was relevant for the JJPC. And so that's Senate Bill 734, Senate Bill 813, Senate Bill 816, House Bill 2472, and House Bill 2677. And you have that all. I'm not going to read it. You guys know how to read.
And 2 of these are agency bills supported by the governor's office, correct?
My 2,
813 and
813 and 816 are OIA agency bills. I know that 734 is Senator Gelsler Bluen. I do not know who 2472 and 2677 is.
No, I knew that, but just back into our conversation earlier, that those 2 are agency.
Those 2 are agency bills sponsored by OIA.
Approved by the governor.
On behalf of the governor.
Yeah.
And then I believe
Good
House
sport.
I believe House Bill 2472 is, what was the acronym again? I know KO.
OCDLA. It's the
OCDLA.
Okay.
And I can speak to 2677. Of course.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms.
That's all we talk about.
In terms of like oldest tracking, which you just saw, out of all these bills, only thing that's been scheduled or had anything is Senate Bill 813 as of today. But we can track them, whatever you all decide is the most important. Commission members, this is just a guiding out of the 8 members that sent me stuff. They are in consensus that these are important. So I will turn it over, unless you have questions for me or any of the finance, I will turn it over to the chair and you all to have a discussion about how you to these bills to guide your discussion and your focus areas.
And just very briefly, I would just mention on 2472, so Representative Krupp has a stakeholder group that meets every Tuesday. And this is a bill that's in that group. And so I know that that one's not quite ready for a hearing yet. But then also if there are thoughts that this group has, then that may be a venue. It might be, I know we don't have enough time probably to get to any feedback today on it, but that I could talk to Crop about having, somebody selected in this group attend when those discussions happen, if you all would like, for the JJPC.
What do you all? I think that would be
Yeah, I think
helpful.
it's a good idea too.
What do you all
But that's
think?
the only one on this list that I know that group is kind of, they're like a workshopping group.
You know where those meetings are gonna
Right,
be
yeah.
held?
Yeah.
And is there like a live stream option for those or a? virtual
It depends.
Okay.
And it usually depends on who needs a live stream option. But generally, I'd say that almost everybody comes in person. Sometimes because it's basically, OCDLA, ODAA, and then a lot of state agencies. And so sometimes the prosecutors and defense attorneys, they'll bring issue experts and they'll appear on camera, but then most of the time we're all together.
Can I make a general comment, of course? Just as a general comment in going through the bills, I have found that sometimes a bill that has the greatest impact on kids is a bill that was written with adults in mind. And it's a criminal justice bill, and there are lots of unintended consequences. And I think one of those was like the whole discussion about decriminalizing drug possession and then criminalizing drug possession, and juveniles were not involved, that were not part of the discussion, and there were lots of impacts on them with that legislation. And so as we're going through this, what's hard sometimes is that these bills are specific to juveniles, but it's hard to think about the huge pool of bills when people are thinking about adults, but they really sometimes really unfortunate negative impacts on kids because they're not part of the discussion. I think that that is something that this commission could do, is really highlighting the issues that impact kids and teens.
I really appreciate that and ask CJC because you're not only staffing this, but the subject matter experts on the larger criminal justice bills that are coming forward. I super appreciate that youth were completely left out of like 3 major bills last session that had huge impacts on our world. Because there was never a mention of a juvenile in the bill, and yet it had sweeping impacts on us. So I guess I would want us to lean in on CJC because you guys have that bigger perspective. That while we're commission members and we can bring stuff to the table, we're gonna ask that you guys flag something that we may not see. Because we're gonna look at it from,
And we have, like, we're tracking 95 bills right now.
yeah, that's,
And so, yeah, we could try to do better at that. But I think too, that is, I think even what you suggest is good. It's again, this is why it's good to keep CJC staff kind of apprised of your concerns, because then like I mentioned, I'm in that room every Tuesday on some of these other bills. And so then we could be the mouthpiece a bit for you as well.
I think Lisa's right.
Yeah. The one thing I would maybe encourage though, and I think we're probably already seeing it for this session, is that with the speed that everything moves at, I think that the degree to which this commission wants to be really involved in session, you may have to meet more often.
Yeah, no, I
to have
agree.
those viewpoints kind of put forward. But yeah, we're there to support you.
And
Also, is that something that the Lewis and Clark, as subject matter experts, could kind of look through some of the criminal bills and bring to this body's attention any bills that they think might have consequences for juveniles?
Yes, the heads are nodding, KO.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Leary.
We're tracking a couple hundred bills. And our scope includes bills that might have criminal justice impacts unintended. It includes some bills that have potential education and healthcare unintended consequences. So we have those, and if the commission would like, we're happy to share those with all of you. And if there's something you want to do with that, that's easy.
That would be great. I know that OJDDA, we had a conversation yesterday during the legislative committee that they have, and it was some of the same conversation around juveniles being just left out, even though the implication would be great. And so I think that it is helpful, and I do think that our technical assistance support could possibly help guide us when that happens, maybe for future. How we can definitely collaborate with CJC in a more cohesive way. And, yeah. Go ahead, Hannah.
I have a thought, I have a question for you. A thought. So we're here as juvenile department directors, not necessarily representing OJDDA. We do have OJDDA's legislative committee, and a couple different times we create papers from OJDDA on some of these. I'm curious if we should be sending those to CJC, just so that if you guys would be interested, like if our comment or our, the education is what made me think about this, is there's lots of education legislation out there, and we just have a statement. It's not for or against any particular bill, but it's almost like a filter for any legislation. What do you think?
The only thing I can think of is like, my mind is going to the SB 813 and the letter that was just written for 813 from the Ledge Committee. Like, is that something that you mean like could be brought here?
So that one is actually taking a position. So I
Okay.
don't know where the one around education was, there's lots of different education bills. So it was more of a statement of best practice kind of. So from our perspective, subject matter experts wrote it in response to education for youth. So it was broader than.
Commissioner Depp.
You go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that sounds like something that we could have, or it's because now we have our subject matter experts from Lewis and Clark. Maybe that's a project that we could have them work on with us on kind of writing something like that moving forward.
Thanks, Chair. Few thoughts. I didn't do the homework. I'm just gonna say right here. Yep. And it's like, oh wait, deadline passed. And there's the bill that actually names my agency, which is on the table. Thank you. But my point is less about that, but more about seems to me way in the back, folks are interested, HB 3004. But it seems to me that maybe it's to Ken's point. Time is of the essence. I think using the technical assistance folks could be really valuable. And we got 5 minutes in today's meeting. It feels to me like one of the values of this body is, and we're gonna need to get our feet under us, and so maybe, who knows if we actually can do this. And we may be leaning a little bit more on CJC to provide a lens, ideally that says what's happening with young people and youth. But my main point is, if we had an hour with the minds around the table, I think it would be really, or it might be 2 hours, to actually look at these. The ones at the top that you said 7 or 8 or 10 people are tracking. But I guess I feel like this is like a critical function of this group to say, hey, SB 260, I just picked that up randomly, it happens to name CJC, but it may have youth implications, or these other things say youth, or they say the youth authority, like, okay, obviously, those are the implication of a larger criminal justice issue for young people. It would love to be getting to the place where we're actually around the table saying, I guess ultimately to your point, like, this is whether we're pro or con, but this has implications and potential consequences or unintended consequences. So I guess the conversation around the table about the bills seems to me could be really helpful in a more in-depth way than we have time for now, but it maybe we could have another conversation to really dive in a little bit more deeply, because this is happening now. And if we don't do that, we'll have, I think, missed an opportunity.
2 years out.
So,
Yep.
so we do have another meeting on May 20th. And the goal for that meeting is for the commissioners to continue to send bill topics that may affect JJPC. But what I will offer is that there is the caveat that although we have to have the 4 meetings per year, there is the option to have another meeting. And so maybe between now and May, if there's folks who would like to get together to discuss bills, maybe you could invite some subject matter experts. You could invite maybe some folks from OJDDA from, okay. Just
Yeah,
the
no,
thought.
I mean, no, May's too late.
Yeah,
It is,
yeah.
So if we want to do it, we should either make a subcommittee or we should notice and have another public hearing. And all of us talk about it.
You actually, Chair, I'm sorry, you really brought up a really interesting point, is maybe we have 5 and understand we all might go back and have passion about other ones. I appreciate that. But we brought 5 up. This is our first session we've ever done. What if we schedule another meeting? Public notice it and all of the appropriate things. And notice that these are I'm just doing a suggestion so you guys can change it. So these are the 5 we're going to talk about. And invite, in our public comment time, invite people to give us information related to those, just to try it out.
Or it could be a special meeting where you don't
Yeah,
have to have the public comment. I'm speaking outside of my.
I have one question. I know,
Go ahead.
Lori, are we as a commission, since there are 2 bills that have already gone through the governor's process? Are we allowed as a commission, I'm not saying we would, are we allowed as a commission to say these are terrible bills? And if we're not allowed to do that, I mean, if that's really outside, then maybe we shouldn't consider them. Maybe we should consider other,
So like the OIA bills.
yes. I mean, if those are already been fully vetted and we're not in a position
Say they're on.
to take a position.
I think that maybe taking a formal position as opposed, I mean, I feel pretty bad for Joe being in the room when you vote on that one, but I mean, I think technical feedback is still fair. You know,
Yeah.
if the juvenile directors wanted to say, here's this OIA bill and how it affects the counties or could affect the counties, or if you wanted to say from a defense attorney standpoint,
Sure.
I do have some concerns about this piece, I think that's fair, but it'd probably be better form to just to say, well, you're neutral, but here's the technical
Okay.
issues that we may or may not have.
So sorry to interrupt you. I just think the newness of the commission, I think it's, maybe we don't have time this time to give formal positions on anything that's currently, I think that where that ship has kind of sailed, given our meeting structure. But I do think the technical feedback and perhaps maybe if there's something that we know of that juveniles are impacted and may not be these 5, but we can give opinion. I don't know if that would be a better fit. Sorry, Lori. I know you.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, I was one of the 8 people, but I wasn't looking for what I thought was relevant. I put everything that related to kids. So I don't know if other people did that, but choosing 5 based on not actually voting, because there was tons of stuff that I would think was more important than other stuff. So I'm just wondering if we are gonna limit it like that, if maybe we should do it again, because other people might have done the same thing, which is just put what's relevant, not what they thought was important.
And maybe just from a pragmatic standpoint, I think Chair is right. The ship has sailed on some things, but again, like for 2472, like I said, that's still being kind of actively negotiated. And so maybe it's even trying to pick some bills, a couple of them that are still in the process. And I think as Joe kind of mentioned, you know, first chamber deadline is in March. And so I think if this body wants to have an impact, it may be, I mean, I guess it is already February, but like another meeting maybe later this month or something like that, or, and then, yes, focusing in on a couple bills, kind of get your feet under you. And then you can think bigger next time. But all I know is that in that group that I've been in, I think we have 10 bills that are being discussed. We've been literally meeting since September. And right now we meet weekly for 2.5 hours once a week. And some of those days, we don't even get through a whole bill. Depending on how deeply people want to discuss it. So it takes a lot of time.
So they're 1 minute over. And the ask, I think, is to have another meeting this month. And what I will offer is unfortunately I won't be there because they all have a child. But Vice Chair Rojo will definitely, you'll be able to lead if there is a meeting
There's a
scheduled.
meeting.
Okay. So can you all, maybe the best way to do this with being overtime right now, it's to email. I have people email Carol. I can do that. Okay, sorry, I didn't put you on the spot. Maybe email Carol if you're interested in having a meeting this month. And if you're willing to join in on that, and then maybe we can just coordinate by email. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Do you know
It could be
the,
virtual.
yeah, it could be virtual.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, we do have, we're 2 minutes over, but I do want to honor the commitment to having, members of the public comment on anything that they've heard. From the public? Hearing none, our next meeting again is May 20th.
If I may, if there are no public comments, I may steal just 30 seconds to throw out a couple of things to the commissioners. One is to draw to your attention that our agency will go and have its budget hearings next week. And we can send a follow-up email, but encourage you, invite you to provide public testimony as it relates to the budget for CJC on February 13th.
We do have our positions to support this commission are in the governor's budget to be made permanent, not limited duration. So even if somebody wanted to come and just say, we support CJC's budget, and we can tell you which pop is for the positions, that would be great.
Can we submit written?
Or submit written, yep. We'll send an email. We have an email that kind of outlines the whole budget breakdown and things that we can send out just to the commission itself. And then you guys can choose what you'd like to do.
And my second point was just a reminder about the CJC Summit on March 6th and 7th. So if you haven't registered or haven't shared that information, please do so. Hope to see many of you there. Appreciation to the folks, part of this commission that are building one of the panels that'll be presented during that day.
I really want to uplift Commissioner Detman and Commissioner Rogers, who I've just kind of brought in to help with the panel. And I think that there's some really great conversation that will happen, unfortunately, that I will miss, but I'm sure it will be amazing. And people are really excited that juvenile is being invited to this one.
It's never been a topic, so thank you. Thank you.
Can you guys send out information about that? That is not.
The 6th and the 7th, I can send one just to this commission.
Yes.
Wasn't there in the email, like there's a scan, a QR code in the email?
If you got any emails from me, there's a click here button. My email
Send,
signature.
we'll send
Okay, thank you.
just
Sorry.
an email on that.
Yeah.
Very easy.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? Well, if I don't see you all in May, which I'm hopeful that I will, I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful next couple months. And look forward to coming up. Thank you. I know you know my name. Thank you all.
Ready to use my own.
I'm gonna be a dad.
When is paternity leave?
August through.
Oh, it will be.
It's kind of.
Passing the baton back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations.